You're on to global news on Equa Television International, beginning with Taliban carry out first public execution since Afghan takeover. North hackers use Itaewon tragedy as Trojan horse. Iran carries out first execution over Armenian protest. FTX founder Bachman Fried facing market rigging probe, and Japan upgrades Q3 GDP as global recession COVID risks persist. This and more stories coming your way. On Wednesday, the Taliban put an alleged murderer to death in the first public execution held in Afghanistan since the Islamic group returned to power. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said the man was shot 3 times by the father of his alleged victim in an execution attended by senior Taliban officials in southwestern Farah province. The man had been accused of stabbing the victim to death in 2017 and stealing a cell phone and bicycle. The news comes just weeks after the Taliban ordered judges to fully enforce their interpretation of Sharia law, including public executions, amputations and flogging, a step that has raised fears of a further deterioration of human rights in the impoverished country. It is first public execution since Kabul fell to the Taliban following the withdrawal of U.S. forces from the country in August 2021. During the Taliban's earlier period of rule from 1996 to 2001, public executions were common, as were other violent punishments. According to the Taliban, the accused had admitted to the killing and the case had been heard by 3 different courts. Afghanistan's Supreme Leader Al-Qadar Amirul Mominin gave final approval for the execution, the statement said. The mother of the victim said, according to reports, that the family had turned down numerous requests to forgive the alleged killer. Among the senior Taliban officials present at the execution were the acting Chief Justice, Deputy Prime Minister, acting Interior Minister, and the Deputy Governor of Farah Province. The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said in a post on Twitter that it strongly opposes the death penalty in all circumstances and calls on de facto authorities to establish an immediate moratorium with a view to abolishing the death penalty. Khalid Abul El-Fadl, a professor of Islamic law at UCLA and one of the world's leading authorities of Sharia law, said in November that within the 1,400-year tradition of Sharia, punishments such as public executions had historically been seldom implemented because most Islamic jurists interpreted the law differently to the Taliban. After seizing power last August, the Taliban had originally attempted to project a more moderate image to gain international support. However, since then, it has clamped down on rights and freedoms. Women in Afghanistan can no longer work in most sectors and require a male guardian for long-distance travel, while girls have been barred from returning to secondary school. Women have also been stopped from entering parks. North Korean hackers exploited South Korea's deadly Halloween crowd crush to aim internet users with malware, according to a report by Google's anti-hacking unit. The state-backed hackers planted malicious software in Microsoft Office documents disguised to look like a South Korean government report on the Halloween crush, the threat analysis group said in a report released on Wednesday. The October 29th disaster, which occurred when thousands of Halloween revelers packed into a narrow alleyway in the nightlife district of Itaewon, resulted in the deaths of 158 young people. Threat analysis group said it had traced the activity to a group of North Korean government-backed hackers known as APT-37, which has a history of aiming South Korean users, North Korean defectors, policymakers, journalists, and human rights activists. Google said it had reported a related software vulnerability to Microsoft within hours of its discovery on October 31st. Microsoft issued a patch to fix the issue on November 8th. North Korean hackers have been blamed for numerous cyber attacks worldwide, many of them cyber theft, targeting gathering funds for the cash-strapped regime of Kim Jong-un. North Korean hackers stole $840 million worth of digital assets in the first 5 months of 2022, up from $400 million the previous year, according to blockchain analysis from China Analysis. The United Nations panel of experts tasked with monitoring the enforcement of sanctions on North Korea has accused Pyongyang of using hacked funds to support its illicit development of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. Now, Iran has announced what is the firstly public known execution of a person convicted for an alleged crime stemming from the country's ongoing protests. On Thursday, the man executed was identified as Mohsen Shekari. According to reports, he was convicted of waging war against God for allegedly attacking a security officer with a long knife and closing off a street in Tehran, demonstrating the speed with which Iranian authorities have vowed to prosecute cases connected with riots. As they often describe incidents related with the protests, the judiciary said there was just over a month between the man's first court session and his execution. The 23-year-old Shekari was arrested on September 25th, just over a week after protests broke out across Iran following the death in custody of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who had been detained by the country's morality police for allegedly not adhering to Iran's mandatory dress code for women. Shekari received his preliminary death sentence on November 20th, and it was carried out on Thursday morning, shortly after being upheld by the country's Supreme Court. According to alleged confessions released by the judiciary, Shekari was accompanied and given a long knife by an associate referred to as Ali, who offered him good money to participate in the riots. Amnesty International had warned earlier this month that at least 28 people could face execution in Iran in connection with the protests, saying authorities used the death penalty as a tool of political repression to end the popular uprising. Judiciary Chief Gholam Hussein Mohsen Ejais had said earlier this week that some of the previous death sentences for corruption on earth and waging war against God in relation to the protests had been upheld by the Supreme Court and will be carried out soon. The first publicly announced death sentence related to the protest was issued on November 14th, with the latest coming on Tuesday when 5 people were sentenced to death for allegedly killing a member of the Basij paramilitary force. Another 11, including 3 minors, received lengthy prison terms in that case. On business and economy, field training exercise FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is being investigated by authorities in the United States to determine if he manipulated the market of 2 cryptocurrencies, leading to their collapse and the implosion of his own cryptocurrency exchange, according to reports. U.S. federal prosecutors are looking into whether Bankman-Fried controlled the prices of Terra USD and Luna, 2 intertwined digital currencies, to benefit his companies FTX and Alameda Research, the report said on Wednesday. The report also said, which cited 2 unnamed people with knowledge of the matter, said the investigation is in its early stages and is not clear if prosecutors have decided that Bankman-Fried did anything wrong. According to reports, a spokesperson for the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office did not respond to a request for comment. FTX, which was valued at $32 billion at its peak, filed for bankruptcy protection last month after the collapse of an acquisition deal involving rival exchange Binance prompted billions in withdrawals from customers. The collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange sent shock waves through the crypto sector, causing thousands of layoffs at crypto companies and bankruptcy of crypto lender BlockFi. Bankman-Fried, who once ranked as the world's 2nd richest millionaire after Mark Zuckerberg, last week denied intending to commit fraud but apologized for making a lot of mistakes in his handling of the cryptocurrency exchange. On Sunday, Bankman-Fried said he will testify before the U.S. Congress about FTX collapse after he finished learning and reviewing the events that led to its implosion. Still on business and economy, Japan's economy, the world's 3rd largest, shrank less than originally estimated in the 3rd quarter, strengthening a view that it's slowly recovering from COVID-19 doldrums, even as large export markets show further signs of weakening. Separate data show the economy had recorded its first current account deficit in 8 years in October, showing high import costs enforced on households and businesses by a decline in the yen's value to multi-decade lows this year. The revised 0.8% annualized quarterly contraction in the gross domestic product GDP released by the Cabinet Office on Thursday compared with economists' median forecast for a 1.1% annualized decline in a poll and an early official estimate of a contraction of 1.2% according to reports. The revision was driven by the upward change in private inventories and compared with a 4.5% annualized quarterly gain in the previous quarter. Japan's economy unexpectedly shrank in the third quarter as global recession risks, China's fluttering economy, a weak yen, and higher import costs hurt consumption and businesses. The economy may rebound in the present quarter due to the relaxing of supply restrictions on semiconductors and cars and lifting of COVID-19 border controls, boosting tourism, some analysts say. However, others are bracing for the global economy to tip into a recession next year, dealing a sharp blow to trade-reliant Asian exporters such as Japan. Before annualizing, third quarter GDP was down 0.2% on the earlier quarter compared with the initial contraction estimate of 0.3%. Analysts had anticipated a similar decline to the earlier reading. More Stories says Bali bomb maker Umar Patek released from Indonesian prison. Indonesia has released on parole Umar Patek, convicted for his role in the Bali bombings that killed over 200 people in 2002 after he completed just more than half of his sentence. Patek, a member of the Al-Qaeda-linked Jemaah Islamiyah (JI), was jailed for 20 years in 2012 after he was found guilty of mixing the bombs used in the attack on two busy nightclubs in the resort town of Kuta. According to a statement from the Ministry of Law and Human Rights on Wednesday that announced his release, Patek will be required to join a mentoring program until April 2030. His parole will be revoked if he violates any of its terms during that time, the ministry added. The Bali attacks were the worst in Indonesian history and led to a crackdown on hardline groups such as JI. Australia and the United States also provided funding and assistance to strengthen Jakarta's counter-terrorism operations. Indonesia announced in August that Patek had become eligible for parole after some reductions to his sentence in a decision criticized by Australia, home to 88 of the Bali attacks. Indonesia frequently gives a sentence remissions to inmates to mark Indonesia's August 17th Independence Day. Authorities believe Patek had shown changes after undergoing a de-radicalization program, Law and Human Rights Ministry spokesperson Rika Aprianti said, according to reports. Again on business and economy, Theranos exco gets 13 years in jail. Ramesh Soni Balwani, the former Theranos executive and business partner of disgraced biotech entrepreneur Elizabeth Holmes, has been sentenced to closely 13 years in prison for defrauding investors and patients. On Wednesday, Balwani, 57, was sentenced to 12 years and 11 months in prison after being found guilty in July of 2 counts of conspiracy and 10 counts of fraud over his role in the blood testing startup Theranos' fraudulent claims. United States District Judge Edward Davila deferred a decision on a request by prosecutors for Balwani to be ordered to pay $804 million in compensation, the same amount sought from Holmes, to a later hearing. His sentence comes less than a month after Theranos founder and former CEO Holmes was sentenced to more than 11 years in prison for her role in the scandal, which cast a light on the pitfalls of Silicon Valley's culture of boundless ambition and cutthroat competition. Balwani, who was in a romantic relationship with Holmes until 2016, had faced up to 20 years in prison. Federal prosecutors had sought a 15-year sentence for him, who was the chief operating officer and president of Theranos, arguing he had presented a fake story about the company's technology and financial stability day after day in meeting after meeting. Balwani's lawyers, who argue the Indian-born entrepreneur was not motivated by greed or fame and had suffered considerably due to the intense media coverage of Theranos, had asked for 4 to 10 months. Theranos, which was founded in 2003 by Holmes when she was 19, claimed to have invented new blood testing technology that permitted patients to easily perform over 200 different medical tests with pinprick of blood. In reality, the company secretly used traditional testing methods and gave patients inaccurate results. Theranos, which was once valued at $10 billion and had the backing of high-profile investors, including former U.S. Treasury Secretary George Shultz and media mogul Robert Murdoch, was widely praised as a Silicon Valley success story, with Holmes drawing comparisons to Steve Jobs. In Africa, African, Caribbean and Pacific countries to work together on road safety. Second day of work in Luanda as part of the summit of the Organization of Africa, Caribbean and Pacific States OACP, which will bring together heads of state next Friday and Saturday in the Angolan capital. The day was marked by the Youth Forum, where road safety and the role of youth in this matter was deliberated. Every year, the lives of nearly 1.25 million people are cut short as a result of a road traffic crash, with 90% of the fatalities occurring in low and middle income countries, according to the World Health Organization. Georges Chikoti, the OACP Secretary General, said the approach of the governments of the organization's member states with regard to road safety must be inclusive and involve the private sector, universities, civil society, and young people in general. Road traffic crashes cost most countries 3% of gross domestic product GDP. The latest adopted 2013 Agenda for Sustainable Development has set an ambitious target of splitting the global number of deaths and injuries from road traffic crashes by 2020. The Angolan Ministry of Youth and Sports vowed to continue implementing road safety awareness programs in schools and religious centers in a country where road safety is still a struggle. And lastly, on global news, Kenya, bold increases fares due to rising fuel prices. Due to the rising cost of gasoline in Kenya, long-distance bus company Each Coast has raised its prices, which has continued to affect the country and new minimum wages. For a one-way ticket from Nairobi to Kitale, the company now charges 1,700 shillings, up from 1,450 shillings, and from 1,800 shillings to 2,000 shillings for a trip to Kisumu, up from 1,400 shillings. Other buses, including Green Line, have raised their prices from 1,600 shillings to 2,000 shillings for a one-way ticket between Nairobi and Kisumu. Easy Coach has for a long time kept its fare at 1,450 shillings during all the major seasons, including Christmas, when demand for up-country travel as it is highest. Azim Dosa, the company's managing director, claimed that the cost of conducting business has dramatically surged, forcing the company to modify its tariffs on numerous routes around the nation. Even if the price of gasoline has slightly decreased over the past 2 months, it is still high, 136 shillings for a litre of diesel on average, compared to a year ago when it was sold for 107 shillings on average. The minimum wage for this year has been added by the government from the earlier range of 7,240.96 shillings to 30,627.45 shillings per month, to a range of 8,109.90 shillings to 34,302.75 shillings per month. Stay with us for more stories on Zoom on Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Now on Zoom on Nigeria, withdrawal limits Senate to debate new central bank Nigeria policy. Business, finance experts and other stakeholders were sharply divided on the implications and timing of the latest cash withdrawal limits by the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN. They are concerned that the new policy might worsen the tight economic environment. The Senate has scheduled a debate on the matter for next Tuesday. Stakeholders are worried about the possibility of implementing hitch-free cash withdrawal limits in communities with blind spots or poor network connectivity. They said the policy implementation timeline and available infrastructure suggest a difficult time for the public. The Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday unveiled a revised cash withdrawal limit with a maximum of 100,000 naira cash withdrawal per week for individuals and 500,000 naira cash per week for companies. The revised cash withdrawal limits, which take effect on January 9, 2023, also affect other payment channels, including automated teller machines, ATM, point of sale, POS, and check-based transactions. Also, the maximum cash withdrawal through ATM is set at 100,000 naira per week, subject to a maximum of 20,000 naira cash withdrawal per day. The Senate expressed reservations about the fresh policy and has scheduled Tuesday for a debate on the new cash withdrawal limits. Senate President Ahmed Lawan believes the CBN should not approach the policy by jumping into it at once, saying many Nigerians will be affected. He, however, noted the need to engage the CBN to get more details on the policy and thus directed the Senate Committee on Banking, Insurance and Other Financial Institutions to discuss the matter during the screening of the CBN deputy governors. Finally, federal government recovery 120 billion naira from proceeds of crimes. The federal government has said it had realized no less than 120 billion naira as proceeds from criminal financial operations since the bill on proceeds of crime recovery management was signed into law beginning of this year by President Muhammadu Buhari. Alhaji Lai Mohammed, Minister of Information, made the disclosure at the news briefing where Minister of Environment presented the scorecard of the ministry under the Buhari administration in Abuja yesterday. The minister said, and I quote, "I have an update on the proceeds of Crime Recovery and Management Act POCA 2022. In line with the new law, all relevant agencies of government have now opened, confiscated and forfeiture properties accounts with the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN. I can confirm that so far the federal government has realized over 120 billion naira among other currencies from POCA. This money will be used to fund the completion of ongoing critical infrastructure projects in the country, such as the second Niger Bridge, as well as Lagos-Ibadan and Abuja-Kano Expressway. We will continue to update you on this," he added. A recap of major stories says Taliban carry out first public execution since Afghan takeover. North hackers use Itaewon tragedy as Trojan horse. Iran carries out first execution over Amenid protests. FTX founder Bankman-Fried facing market rigging probe, and Japan upgrades Q3 GDP as global recession COVID risks persists. Thank you for watching. Remember, continual effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. Enjoy your day.